Hey everyone, I'm Nick and welcome to the channel. Now if you've watched the channel before, you might recognize this car as my $600 supercharged Mercedes C-Class. I've done a lot of work to it to get it back on the road, and one of the things I've done is add an aftermarket head unit. So that adds Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but one of the other things you can add is a backup camera. So today I'm going to walk you through the whole process of installing and wiring a backup camera for a clean install like this. So the first thing we want to do to connect our backup camera is to get to the connection at the back of our head unit. So to do that, we have to disassemble the center stack here. So we're going to start with the vents, then this panel, and then we'll work back up from the bottom here until we can pull the radio out. Now I went into a lot of detail for this in the radio install video, so you can check that out too, but one of the things we have to remember is there's two little catches here. See these two little tabs? And we need to angle this past the lock, so the bottom tab, once it's up, will let you pivot this up a little further, which will let you get to the screws at the bottom. And then that top one here will let you pivot this down further to get to the catches at the top. So you angle this up, gently push that little tab outwards. That angles it further. Do the same thing in here. On this vent, it's on the left side. Actually, and then there's a T20 screw here and here. Now in my case, this vent was damaged before I got the car, so the top clips, which we would normally reach in and push down with a screwdriver or a pick, are broken. So once I take these out, they'll come out. Should be able to see them right here. Right there. Those screws should be captive, and then what you would do is angle this down, release this catch and this catch, so you can angle it further and release the two tabs in there. So, but this should, come out. I have to wiggle this out. There we go. So normally right here you would have this little catch that grabs it here, so you lower it down out of here, and it should let you pull it out. The screws are supposed to be captive, but unfortunately they have fallen into the dash for me. We will get them back. Two screws. All right, now right here, a screw here and a screw here. This will slide up. There's a connector here. Right there. Put that aside. Now we have to work from the bottom. So just pull this trim panel off. I have a manual. If you have an automatic, there's a little trim panel here. Slide it forward. And then rotate it. So there's two clips. There we go. There's a connector for the 12 volt. I actually drilled a hole for this wire. Okay, that comes off at an angle. You can see it right here, plugs in there. And then down here we have two screws. We're doing the outer ones. See right there. Same thing on the other side, we're doing the outer screws. And that pulls forward. So to disconnect here, there's two connectors. One is a cam lock. So you get this here, this one right here, and this cam lock here. You pull that, you release the gray catch, pull it all the way down, and you're good to go. Now we can remove the head unit itself. So that's going to be 4 T20 screws. And then you can slide this forward. I actually already connected the backup camera wire when I installed the radio, but I didn't try to connect this power harness. So there's a little power wire that goes to the extension here, and think that this here, this red wire called back on my head unit, should provide 12 volts when the car is in reverse. So we're gonna test that out. What we need to do here is, I guess, just strip this and then try to go from this to a ground and put the car in reverse and see if that will provide 12 volts. And if it does, I can just power the camera with that and I don't have to worry about anything at the back except finding a ground for the camera. That's what I'm doing here. I'm gonna take this back wire, strip it. I'm actually just gonna use a butt connector right now to make it a little easier for me to check with my multimeter. Okay, just wedge that here so I can actually go into reverse there. All right, so reverse automatically goes in here. Now we need this and a ground. Is this a ground? Where is their metal here? Well, I guess the chassis is a ground. That's 12 volts. See, 11.73. And if I take it out of reverse, it goes to 0. Take that out, shut this off. And that means that this wire off of the camera extension, I can strip. You might notice it's really thin, but one thing I do sometimes is fold it over, twist. Okay, that should be good. Now what we can do is actually put this back in. Oh, I remember it was a tight fit, so. And then I gotta drop this panel because that's where I put my extension into. And we can double check that we're getting 12 volt at the other side. Down here we have these 3 screws here. This is what we're looking for. I ran this in previously. I'm gonna make sure that gets 12 volts, and that would mean our connection is good. I might have to slide this forward just to get a ground on there. We'll do the same thing. 0. It's 11.79. Right there. Now, if you didn't watch the radio install, the way I ran the wire here is you reach down through here behind that panel and you can actually feed it through. I think you have to go through the main opening here and you can kind of feed it through in there. It's a little tight, but it'll fit. I may have done it the other way, like fed it up in there and just pulled it up through once I caught it and plugged it in where it needed to go. Now to reassemble this, do everything backwards. I'm gonna leave this open because there's another job I have to do in here, but we're gonna keep moving on the routing for the backup cameras. So to run this video camera extension, what we're gonna do is we're gonna run it inside the trim and then around this B-pillar and down towards the rear. So one thing we're gonna do first is remove this panel, which is easy if you just grab a trim tool, you can just pop out. There we go. Slide that out. There's a hook there, there we go. And what we're gonna do here is pull this through around here and then it can go into the trim. I'm actually gonna start by untangling it before I start feeding things through. Then we can actually screw this back in while we're here. Leave a tiny bit of slack in there just in case. So right here what we're going to do is we're going to start tucking it inside the seal here. So now as we come here, I have the wire run all the way into here, and you'll notice this is actually a giant zip tie. I'm going to show you why it's here. So back here in the trunk, we have little bit of trim here, and this is held on with 2 clips, like one right here and one right here. So these are, they look like this. So there's like a base piece and a cap piece, so, or a plunger kind of thing. So what this does is it pushes in and it'll push these apart to stop them from coming out. So you got to carefully pry this out, and then you can pull this piece out, and then this can flex out. Now I'm going to put this light in here, and I'm going to show you why, and I'm going to show you why I have that zip tie in there. So instead of removing the seat completely, you can kind of pull this here, and if you look in there with the right alignment, you can make out a little bit of light in there. And that light is that cavity back there behind the liner. So I fed this in and aimed it in there, and that'll allow me to pull this through into there so I can get it further into the trunk. So I'm going to tape up this piece on here, and it'll pull it through. So I'm going to go in there, grab the other side of the zip tie and pull it through. So you can kind of see in here, see what I can do. Yep, the zip tie is right here. Pull through and hopefully it'll come through. Might have to go to the other side and see. Yeah. Feed it in by hand there. Pull that through. We don't want to go too fast. But right here I can reach here and wash here. So since our goal is to tuck this away, I don't want to take too much slack out because I want to get this right here. So we have it right here. Push that down in there. And it's tucked away, so now nothing is visible here. Just runs all the way down to the front. So now we're gonna remove this trim from the trunk so we can run that wire up in here, tuck it away, and into the plate area. So the first thing we have to do is take off these 2 screws, which are T25s. A little short, a little point. It just comes off here. The handle has a little tab here. So right in here, we have to pry on that to release it. So this pops out. So this here is where that catches. And now we have to take off all these clips, which are center. You can just pull them out. I'm gonna pull the little plungers out here. And then we'll pull the actual retainer out. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And then I think there's one on here and one on here. And this is the inner part of the retainer here. So there's a little connector in here for the emergency trunk release. That looks like that right here. Latch. And we can slide this out. Slide it out of these guys here. Now with our panel off, you can actually see there's a harness that runs up here for, you know, all the lock and the latch up here and the release. And we're actually going to follow along this to get our camera wire, camera plug. So if we look in here, You can see that loop there is the harness that goes into the panel, the trunk panel. So what I'm going to do is actually zip tie this to that, and then what we're going to do is also try to run it inside this plastic cover. So as you can see right here, there's a little cover here, and it kind of latches in there. So when we pop that open, feed the wire through, pop it back in. Then there's one here, 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 and here. And then I can zip tie it along here and have it follow that. I got a zip tie in there. I'll trim that up in a second. Now I'm gonna see about popping that trim off. Okay, see if you pry that off here. So you can see it's out of its holder. I can just slide this in, pop that back down, and it's latched back in. Now we'll work our way up along there. All right, hinge looks good. That's all snapped back in here. And now we can bring it over into this area. And we are right here. All right, looks great. All right, so the camera came in, and it looks like it's gonna fit really nicely. This essentially matches this, but with a camera on it. There's a little cutout for the cable to come in, but we'll have to make sure there's a place for it to run in the mount. In there. I guess we could decide, technically we could put it on this side, but I think we'll put it on this side so that the light for the plate light can shine out through here. So that means our next step is to remove this plastic trim panel so we can remove the housing for this right here. So this has to slide outwards, and right now with this panel in place, it will not slide out. So let's get to it. The first step to remove the plate trim is to remove the 8mm retaining nut inside the trunk. It turns out the 8mm nut is captive, and the stud that holds it in place backed out enough for it to spin in place. So I used a trim tool to push back the panel while I finished unscrewing the nut. You could also hold the stud in place if you remove the license plate. So now to remove this panel, what we can do is use one of these. I'm gonna go in, there's a 4 along the bottom, 4 pins, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what you could do is kind of get under here. In here you can see the pin there. So that one's already released, but what you can do is you put a little bit of pressure on this, and then in here you can get in with a tool and kind of push the little tabs. So what we're gonna do back here next is, so you see this one here, we're gonna put pressure on, you know, the edge of the panel, and then in here get in and try to push in those tabs. Be careful if you use your bare hands, you don't want to get pinched, but that'll release it. I'm gonna take my trim tool, push up from the top gently here, kind of pry on it, but also there we go. Try something here. Use a 7mm socket. Yep, so the 7mm socket, you can kind of slide over the clip and release it. Where's the last one? Here we go, all right. So you see right here, we've got our clips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it turns out that the 7mm socket will fit over it enough to squeeze the prongs in, and that'll help you release it. So that's good to know. Now we can put this aside, put it in the trunk. So as you can see, I've already pulled out the connector for that side plate housing. So inside there's one side is a tab, so it's on the inside on this case, and we want to release that. Push it in and then it pops out. All right, so you can see right here, what I had to do is push in here to release it, and then it's supposed to angle out, but a little bit of, when I pushed it, it just popped out because this side kind of catches on the edge of the opening and that slides up. Now what we're gonna do is assemble this. So see right there, that's gonna slide on here, but as you can see, there's no opening for that camera wire. So what I gotta do here is mark this so we can make an opening through here, and that way our wire will go inside the car and we'll be able to use it. Okay, this is wedged in now. I see it also holds the bulb. So first thing we're gonna do is I'm going to mark this and I'm going to cut a groove in there so this can fit. And then we have to see if this is flush with the trunk panel. We may have to cut a groove in there as well. So let's get to work. So right here I've marked where that opening has to be. But what we're gonna do is you could probably get in with a file. Let's see if I pull this out. If I use this file, it'll probably be just a little smaller. That's just the right size. We're gonna grind that off. Eye protection, ear protection. Just go slowly. Close, but not deep enough. So that's a good start. That's pretty close. Now I just have to see, will it actually clear, which I don't think so yet. So I gotta go in a little further. Okay, that clears in here. I don't think it'll clear into the trunk panel. Now since this here needs to actually be flush with this piece, so we're gonna grind down in here. Do that little by little. Now right here, I am getting a little close, a little thin on this. So what I'm actually gonna do is cut a small notch in here so that the wire can fit, and I'll round it off, and then I'll paint it because you don't want any rust to happen in here. So I'm gonna just file a small notch in there, and we'll keep going. A little groove there. Let's see. I'm gonna file that up. It feels good. Okay. Let's put some paint on here. Get your touch-up stick. In my case, it's 040. You could use any generic black in there. It's not gonna be visible, but since I have it, just use some of this. There we go, and let it dry. All right, so now we have our groove in here and our groove in there. We can slide this in. So what we wanna do is feed this through the opening here. And then you want to make sure this side angles in. There we go. Down. That's snapped in there. That is here. All right. First, we want to be able to make sure this will actually slide out if I, yes, okay, and then let's slide back in if we put it back in place. So that means if we leave slack on the inside, we could pull this in and out as needed without leaving a loop. So that will look really clean here, very nice. I'll put the screws in later because I may have some LED bulbs to replace these incandescent bulbs, and we want to check that the camera works. So our next step is going to be to make the connections. So let's see, what do we have? So this is our little power harness for the camera. Got power and ground. And right here we have our video extension that goes to the head unit. So we can make this connection to get video. Now if you remember, this brings 12 volt from the head unit when we put the car into reverse. So we're gonna connect that to this red wire here. So let me go get my tool, like my wire stripper and my crimpers. And we have to find a ground for this. So first thing we're gonna try is actually that nut that held that panel in here. All right, so we are stripping this here. Okay, that's in. I'm gonna strip this, find the ground. So what I'm doing here is kind of wedging the ground wire into the opening where that trim panel screws into, just to have a ground and test it. I'm getting a warning for my right license plate lamp. That's because I didn't plug the harness back in yet. It's working, okay. And it looks like, yep, it's oriented properly, awesome. But that means that ground works as well, awesome. So what I did with this wire is I just kind of wedged it in that opening, and it turns out that is a ground. So if that hadn't worked, I would have tapped into the ground on this harness, which would have been the brown wire. And you can tell because there's a brown wire on all of the harnesses, including the other light. But we won't need to do that. So I'm gonna plug in the plate light harness back in. And now we just have to tuck this away too. Our first step before we do any of that is going to be to put our panel back in here. This is a good time to wipe all this down if you need to. All right, let's get this panel back in. So what we have to do is make sure this threaded piece lines up with the hole. And we gotta slide that over the camera. In fact, probably have to wiggle this out so we can feed it through. Here we go. Make it a little easier. Line up the pinholes. See what we can do here. Do I have to remove my license plate? Let's see. My suspicion is the stud for that bolt is loose in the plastic, so I can push it with the plate out of the way so that I can tighten the nut on the inside. Yep, that's what I thought. Okay. Right here is the little stud thing, and we want to make sure that it centers on the nut so we can get it started. That's grabbed it. Now we can snap these in. That is in. Just have to hold that in place. I'm gonna use a flathead screwdriver to brace the squared section. It's a square, there's like a square opening there. And if I could stop this from turning, have it pull itself in there. Then I can keep going until it's snug. Awesome. All right. I just have to figure out how to ground that into there. Like, since it's a captive nut, I can't actually thread that on. Unless I have a small nut for that. Let's see. Hey, perfect. So it turns out, very luckily, I have a M5 by 0.8 nut. So I'll be able to just use that here. Just kind of wedge and get that stuck in there if I can. There we go. Tighten that up. That should do it. Right here I put a second nut on there. It's just lightly on, it's just to hold the ground. And what we're gonna do is just tape that ground wire out of the way so it doesn't like get pulled and stuff. There we go. Now if we can wrap this in some fabric tape, we could probably maybe up here. Let's do a little wrap in fabric tape. Okay, that looks good. I'm gonna wrap this too in fabric tape. That should be okay here. We can test it again. We're gonna see if both of our lights work. They do, looks good, awesome. All right, so before we close this up, let's go over here. We've got our wiring coming up here, zip tied on there. This is zip tied up here and it's got fabric tape around it. I'll come and readjust this if I need to, but it should hold in place here. We've got our wire running in here into this, which is right back there. It comes out here. That should be enough slack, yeah. So if we need to pull this forward and back, it should still work just fine. So that's great. Now we just have to put our panel back in. So to do that, one tip I have is that you remember these clips here we used to run the wire up? If we undo that here, this will shift a bit. There's another one right here. We'll do the same thing. That'll let us pull this out of the way a bit and that'll allow us to slide the panel in a little more easily. So our first step is going to be to kind of align it there and then we'll start putting the pins back in. We don't want to forget to plug this in, but first we'll start by aligning this in here. So it pulls back with that clip undone. Pop this. Make this connection right here. Connector only plugs in one way, and now we can move it back. And we're pretty much in place. It looks like all the wires in here are gonna be out of the way, so that's great. We can pop these clips back in. This one is not in place. Yeah, there we go. This one will slide down because there's no cable inside. It can't slide out of place. Now we can start with the inner pins. We're gonna just put all those in place. So again, as a quick recap, that's along here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so that's just the base pins. We also have the plungers to put in. I mean, it may not be the technical term, but these will have to go in. I'm gonna double check before we do that the camera's working, just so if I need to get back in, you know, if for whatever reason something moved, I can still pull it all out pretty easily. All right, put these plungers back in. There we go, those are all in. Now we have this to put back on. So this will snap over here. If you remember, there's a little snap there on the handle part. I think we have to angle it down. good. This is the same as the trunk liner up top. Same type of pins. There we go. That's all buttoned up. Now I can close this up and go take a look. Here we go. Well, it's working. And with that, all we need to do is button all this back up, put all the screws back in. So you can see from here, you can barely see it. And it looks really clean from over here. Just tucked away here. You'll see it's there if you're looking for it, but it's pretty subtle. It's out of the way. It's secure. Looks good. Nice. So that wraps up the backup camera install. It looks really clean and it makes this car even easier to park. If you want to get a backup camera like the one I used, I'll leave a link in the video description, but just keep in mind there are 4 different styles of plate light covers for this generation, so you'll want to get the one that matches your car. If you have any questions about the process, let me know down in the comments, and if this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like. If you want to see more content like this, or you want to watch me work on this car again, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.